today, Diversifying Funding. We are thrilled with our panelists that have joined us here today. I'm Amy Lampi. I am not only on the board of AFP Houston, I also am a fundraising consultant for a global firm called BWF, but I'm based here in Houston. And I am so thrilled to be doing this panel with my colleague and friend, Loubel. So Loubel, why don't you take it away with the rest of the introductions?
Hello, everyone. My name is Loubel Galik. I am a senior consultant at Sterling, which is a local Houston nonprofit consulting firm. And I'm also on the board of AFP Houston. So my partner in crime here, Amy Lampi, and I are actually very, very excited about today. We are very grateful for all of you taking some of your Friday to be with us. I believe in addition to one of our panelists, Sondee, my mother is also on right now watching me. So hello, Mom. Please don't ask professional questions during the chat later on, but I am thrilled to have you on too. But just some background on why Amy and I decided to do this panel. We as consultants, get many, many questions from clients, from past clients, colleagues, and friends about what's the next step? What is to predict or plan and strategize through this pandemic. And especially back in March, I think there was a thought that there was a finish line ahead. What the timeline of that would be was still unsure, but now more and more, I believe that that timeline is still TBA. And yet nonprofits continue to sustain, maintain, and thrive because they need to, because all of you work for folks in organizations that make this city and this country, and many hundreds and thousands of beneficiaries depend on you. So when Amy and I started working on this panel, we thought one of the most important things was to ensure that we had three excellent representatives from three different sectors. So today we have human services, arts, and medicine. And while they're introducing themselves later, but today we are just really thrilled to welcome Sondee Chalcraft from Search, Lise Bohn from Stages Repertory Theater, and Karim Kafray from MD Anderson. And like Amy said, we will be doing a Q&A later. Amy, did you want to talk about the chat function and how they can do that during?
Yes, you can definitely send in your questions in the chat, and I will be moderating that. And then we will have that available for the Q&A section.
Excellent. So to get started, we actually will be introducing each panelist. I'll have to return to Amy to get her answer. But what we wanted to do with next week already being Halloween, if y'all can believe it, we were going to, as part of her introduction, each panelist was going to actually state their favorite costume, Halloween costume, and or one of their children's favorite costumes as their introduction. So I do want to say that stay tuned. Hopefully many of you are my Facebook friends, but I am working next Saturday to dress up. We're not going anywhere, so it'll just be my husband and all of you on Facebook as a Zoom screen. So a lot of y'all might be part of it. If you've been in any meetings with me in the past 7 months, I've subtly taken a picture of my screen, and you might be part of my costume for next week. But I hope you'll have an excellent weekend if we haven't said it later on. But what I'm going to do now is go ahead and get started. Amy, if you want to pull up the first question. Our first question will be, and the slide will pop up, there it is. How has the pandemic affected your organization in the past 7 months? I think it is very clear that all nonprofits have been affected by COVID-19, but as we go around our table, each of our panelists will discuss specifically how it's affected their organization. So I will start with Karim Kafray. Go ahead, Karim.
Thank you, Loubel. Thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody for attending today. Karim Kafray, I work at MD Anderson. I've been there for about the last 6.5 years, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate today. Selfishly, it was nice to tie a tie. I truly thought I forgot how to do that, and clearly my 3-year-old forgot that I wear these often in my day job because he said, "Daddy, what is that?" when I walked downstairs. So In disclaimer fashion, relative to Halloween, I do have 3 children that may come in. We have a new kitten as well, so bear with me and forgive me if I have to handle that. And as an AFP board member, I just really appreciate all of you participating and having the opportunity to join today. So to the question, Loubel, really, how's the pandemic affected us transformatively, I would say. Healthcare, especially with such an immunocompromised population that MD Anderson serves, people battling cancer. So at our core, we've focused on patient and employee safety, and have taken a very conservative approach. As a result, we're fortunate to be experiencing remarkably low infection rates relative to our peer group, yet it has impacted daily census as well as patient experience because of things like no to limited visitors. So that has been extremely hard for our patients and the families we serve, as well as our employees. Additionally, the tough choice to decommission research was significant for a period of time, and that really allowed us to provide additional PPE, make it available for our frontline. Luckily, we've started to ramp up our research steadily of late, allowing us to offer more of our clinical trials again, and that help patients, and also has provided our research community to further come together in a collaborative way. And from an employee perspective, it's impacted our hiring and employee onboarding, morale, and traditional fundraising activities, especially frontline gift work. All in all, though, I would say it's my opinion that it's created significant innovation, made us better, and truly has positioned us for growth. It seems that we've accelerated what would previously have been, almost 5-year ideas into 6-month plans. We've adopted a work from home model for the long term, such that moving forward, probably 30 to 60% of our workforce will work from home for the majority of their work weeks, which is significant for more than 21,000 employees. And additionally, there are numerous working groups that have been created across the organization to envision a post-COVID care treatment model, so telehealth, as well as the fundraising piece, working groups around engagement, virtual engagement opportunities, virtual onboarding. We've experienced some new partners and even a deeper laser focus on our mission via safety and care for patients, families, employees. So it's really been an opportunity of innovation and strength to navigate through this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karim. Lisa, how has the pandemic affected stages? The arts, especially, is a big topic right now, but go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know how the pandemic has affected your organization.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. So thrilled to be here this morning. I'm Lise Bohn. I'm the Development and Communications Director at Stages. I've been with Stages for about 20 years. I moved from the marketing side into the fundraising side and never looked back. I love this work and am so excited to be here. And, as you mentioned, this is such a challenging time for the arts, and particularly for the performing arts. So Stages, we opened our brand new $35.4 million home in January, and we had been performing here at the Gordy for just 7 weeks when we shut down all of our performances due to COVID. And we'd been building this incredible community support and momentum coming out of our capital campaign and through the grand opening. And then we truly, in the space of 24 hours, just hit the off switch. And it's in some ways been off since then. So that, at the early stage of the pandemic, our most immediate concern was how to maintain at least some of that engagement and enthusiasm without being able to gather together in person. So as a performing arts organization, our entire model historically has relied on in-person interaction and experiences across all of our constituencies. And also for us, on a fairly balanced combination of earned and contributed revenue. So for Stages, that's historically been about 55% earned to 45% contributed. And middle of March, that entire model shifted overnight. And along with everyone else, we learned to embrace that word pivot, which I know we've all said and written probably 1,000 times by now. Right now, we're closer to 75 to 80% contributed revenue, which is a big shift in expectations for our development team. And similarly to what Karim was saying, our staff team really has learned to operate differently, where we've become much more flexible, I think. We've embraced new tools and ways of working those are things that I think will be lasting changes for us, even beyond this moment. About 60% of our staff are still working from home now. And I think we're going to have, a different way of thinking about that coming out of this situation. We returned to virtual performance in June, and since then we've reached more than 35,000 audience members through digital engagement. And what's been really incredible about that is that has expanded access and is allowing us to reach new audiences. And then in November, we're actually right now on the floor below me, they are in rehearsal for a live streamed performance. So that'll be actually performed live and broadcast out into the world from the Gordy of Honky Tonk Laundry. So, we have found ways to use technology and use mediums that are different for theater to continue to deliver on our mission and engage people in storytelling and build community. And ultimately, for all of the challenges that we've experienced, I think we're really celebrating the opportunities and the innovation that has created.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa. Now, Sondee, part of the reason we asked you to be part of this, Amy and myself, not only because you're an excellent nonprofit professional, but also because Search has an fascinating and unique mission in that it's actually growing. The need is growing through the pandemic. So please take some time to introduce yourself and also how the pandemic has affected your organization.
Sure. Thanks, Loubel, and Amy, and everybody who's here today. I'm really honored and happy to be part of this conversation. My name is Sondee Chalcraft. I am the Vice President of Development at Search Homeless Services, and I've been with Search for about 5.5 years now. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Search, to oversimplify it, Search works with individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness to help them get back into homes and regain their stability and their self-sufficiency. And so the pandemic really has highlighted more than ever the importance of having a safe place to call home. So when you think about our clients, they are extremely vulnerable on an ordinary day, and you throw the pandemic into the mix, and they are exponentially more exposed and vulnerable. So for people who are living on the streets, they don't have a safe place where they can go and stay home. They aren't even able to wash their hands. For people who are living in shelters, they are in crowded conditions with large numbers of people. And so really much more difficult to stay safe from the virus. And so beyond our current clients, we're also anticipating growth in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness and an increased demand for our services. With so many people out of work, evictions mounting up tremendously. So many people just living on the edge, barely hanging on, are going to be pushed over the brink and find themselves homeless and in need of our services. And it's too soon to quantifiably measure the impact at this point on that increase in homelessness. But in our morning office hours, walk-in hours, we are seeing far more people than we usually do, and far more people who are experiencing homelessness for the first time in their lives and never ever imagined they would find themselves in this position. From an agency perspective, we have never worked remotely before, so that adjustment has been a large one for our staff, but most of our staff are now and have been back at work in person. For our program staff, our case managers, our social workers, their work is so personal and individualized. It really depends on face-to-face contact, not to mention the fact that most of our clients are not equipped for virtual communication. And so they have been back at work with altered schedules and shifts to allow for social distancing. So our focus now really is on continuing to get people off the streets into housing as quickly as possible to protect their health and the health of the entire community. And for those individuals who've already been housed and are living in one of our housing programs, we're focusing on on helping them through the pandemic, making sure that they understand what is happening, how to stay safe, making sure they have the equipment that they need to stay safe, helping them deal with the mental and emotional aspects, the isolation, preventing relapse with substance, alcohol use, and helping them connect to other resources. And while a lot of the places that they usually go for food or other things are unavailable, and making sure that they can stay housed over the long term.
Wonderful. Sondee, thank you so much. Quickly, and so Amy is actually one step ahead of me, like she always is. The second question is, y'all have all described kind of generally and in big picture how the pandemic has affected your organization. The next question is, take 2 examples of how you have pivoted in your fundraising and funding sources. So Karim, I'm going to punt that back to you. How have you and your team at MD Anderson 2 ways you have pivoted?
Sure thing. You know, I think really it's like Lisa almost mentioned a minute ago, event staff are now movie producers. And so the increased access, even as she mentioned, I know that our events folks have really done a remarkable job on being creative and leaned into this. And so that's one of the big things. So consolidated numerous fundraising events that have moved to online formats is definitely one to allow broader access. We've also doubled down on expanded our online giving platforms. So from, you know, a virtual boot walk that we've got going on, like many organizations, walks and runs, you know, to pivot to have that in your neighborhood. But to me, I think part of it is the various fundraising pages. I've seen some of these morphed into almost, you know, for us, My Cancer Story giving pages. And so it's really given some of our folks opportunities and supporters to continue to fundraise and to promote that. And I think that's been an example. You know, likewise, and I don't know that it's often talked about as much, and every organization is a little different, but we've had to make a lot of tough calls. A lot of the team members have made very tough calls in terms of canceling events such as our Polo on the Prairie, which, as it sounds, is a polo match and a live concert in West Texas. And it was truly heartbreaking to this family that after 35 years has had to cancel that, especially on the heels of a flood. Imagine that, just last year in West Texas. But it was the right decision. And so when those moments have happened, I think collectively we've all really tried to lean on personal outreach as much as we can, you know, truly focus on the enduring relationships and a long-term view to navigate. And so those are some of the things that I feel have been secret successes. And another key pivot has been our deeper focus on engagement, from virtual site visits, you know, stewardship calls, personalized videos from our faculty, you know, virtual grand rounds and science talks that are happening. These are things, again, that I think people had talked about for years and yet got accelerated and not only in development, but organizationally have truly been accelerated. And it's really, I think these are here for the long haul. And it's really offered almost an even deeper closeness for some of our donors and volunteers and employees to be engaged in a different way and almost closer to the organization, as weird as it sounds. So ultimately, we're doing the best that we can of meeting people where they are, especially now that healthcare is such a present topic. Some choose to move their philanthropy forward as planned, you know, or enhance it, and while others have decided to delay. And I think one other area in plan giving, you know, I feel that this is an area where when the pandemic hit, a lot of folks made a mad dash run to their CPAs, their estate planners, right? When they had a chance to kind of think about that. And that's a real opportunity from a plan giving perspective. When people have those moments in their lives and they're thinking about that, those are opportunities for some different conversations. You know, this whole thing, I think for many has been very, very humbling, and is kind of a rallying point for many of us to take stock of all that we've got and the blessings we have, and ponder a little bit with the time that we've got to reflect on what's next. So I think from a plan giving perspective as well, you know, leaning into those conversations with folks has been helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Karim. Sondee, what are 2 examples of how Search and your team have pivoted with everything going on?
Sure. So Search has two major fundraising events each year, and they make up a substantial part of our fundraising, so they are very important to us. And we have our annual luncheon, which takes place in the spring, and our picnic in the park, which happens in the fall. And I think Search was one of the first to take their event virtual. Our luncheon was scheduled for April the 30th, and I have to laugh now when everything shut down on March 13th. We thought, oh, we have 6 weeks still. We'll be fine. We can still proceed. Little did we think that, here we are 7 months later, but quickly figured the ins and outs of how to pull off a virtual event, and we're very pleased with it. We ended up, reaching and even exceeding our fundraising goal. Ended up finding though that while we had hoped to be able to expand our reach by opening it up to anyone, we actually had fewer people than we would have had we, all been gathered in the room. It's, when you have a virtual event on your calendar, it's a lot easier to skip it than it is, sitting at someone's table at the actual event. But we also just have gone back and forth on our 2021 luncheon, and recently made the decision that will definitely be virtual, but have some concerns as to whether we will be able to reach our fundraising goals as we have in the past. This year's luncheon, we had already done the bulk of the fundraising by the time we made the decision to go virtual. And so this will be the first time that we have fundraised for an event that's virtual from the get-go, and also have concern that people are just zoomed out and tired of these. So trying to come up with something unique and different that will appeal to people and inspire them to come. And for our fall event, our picnic, historically Picnic in the Park, we actually are having an in-person event in November, and have come up with a way to do that safely. So we'll be hosting it at a drive-in movie theater, and we'll still be able to gather as a community, which we're thrilled about, but doing it in a socially distant way with everybody safely tucked away in their own cars. And with everything though going on in our country today, with the pandemic, with the racial justice movement, it felt like we needed to do more than just have a fun party. And so we've rebranded it to a picnic with a purpose, and are incorporating 3 days of service leading up to the event, where we are offering volunteer opportunities to those involved with the picnic, with Search, and with 10 of the other nonprofit agencies that we partner with, to make a meaningful difference through the event. So we've had a great response. We actually just had to add a second screen for the event to accommodate the response. So if anyone is interested, come join us for a fun night out on November the 11th.
Awesome. Sondee, that is awesome. Okay, question number 3, and I highly encourage, I know Amy and I have spoken about how we could do 3 panels on ways to redo your events. So if you do have any extra questions regarding events, please put that in the chat, and hopefully we can use your question later on in the seminar. So please do that. The third question is, how have you had to diversify your funding sources this year? A lot of folks, just like y'all mentioned, bring in a lot of earned revenue through ticket sales, etc., and no longer can because of social distancing and gathering. A lot of clients we have also have a lot of donors that are based out of the oil and gas industry, and have had to really re-strategize their corporate giving. So I'd love to hear from 2 of y'all about how you have diversified your funding sources for this year. Lise, I'm going to go ahead and turn that to you.
Thank you. Well, I know that our topic is diversifying funding sources, which is a great goal. And in fact, what our experience has been is that building new relationships has been challenging for our sector during this time, because the work that we're asking people to be part of is not happening in the expected way. So we've really been leaning into our closest existing relationships, and what we're diversifying is the ways that we engage with them and ask for their support. as a lot of our performing arts peers have done, we've asked our subscribers and our ticket holders to actively support by keeping their existing tickets for performances that either may have been canceled or may not be happening in the same way that they were planned, or by donating the value of those back to us rather than taking refunds, although of course we will provide refunds if that's what somebody desires. And normally those kinds of transactions that we talk about as ticket turnbacks really are not a key source of philanthropy or donor growth, because typically the patrons are not approaching those from a philanthropic perspective. It's more transactional, and it's usually because, you know, they had a schedule change. But now that we're asking them to do this as a way of supporting, people are really hearing that message of a request for support, and they're responding from a donor mindset. And the outcome of that, which is really incredible, is that we have a considerable number of patrons who are identifying as donors for the first time. So it's created a new opportunity to expand the donor base within our existing audience. And one of the challenges we've really had to address is how to continue to deliver value to our donors when historically, especially for the arts, so many of our benefits have been connected to in-person experiences. So we've just been talking about that with events, and you know, we've been doing similar things, pivoting in terms of how we are presenting our events, whether those are virtual events through various platforms. Sondee, I love that you're doing a drive-in event. We actually just recently did a drive-in season launch event on the roof of our parking garage with a radio transmitter, which is like you use at the drive-in movie theater, to broadcast the program to all of our patrons in their cars while they had a little picnic lunch. So there's all kinds of you know, interesting ways to think about how we bring people together and approach that, you know, kind of tweaking the message and the ways that we're asking people to consider donating into a different kind of direction.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Now, Sondee, same with you. I know that Search has had tremendous success in pre-pandemic with regular and constant donors. So with the pandemic, how have you had to diversify those funding sources if they have shifted in such a big way?
Sure. Yes. So Search does receive substantial government funding. So depending on the year, 50 to 60% of our funding is government based. And fortunately that has stayed very stable and is not really at risk. And there have been some additional government sources because of the pandemic. But on the private fundraising side, we have had, you know, a number of our donors who are dedicated, loyal donors who still very much believe in our mission, but simply have had to shift this year and either decrease their giving or pause it for now. And so while of course we are still focusing on major gifts, we're expanding our focus on higher volume, lower dollar gifts. So working on peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns, really working to expand our recurring giving program, and then continuing to grow our social media presence and network. We're relatively new with the social media aspect of things, so continuing to focus on that, and then just encouraging our loyal supporters to help us engage with others and help us spread the word. And trying to make it as easy as possible for them. Even we've created a step-by-step manual for our board members on how to share our posts and link and share information about Search with their networks as well. So really focusing on acquiring new donors and higher volume.
Wonderful. One of the things that we had getting some feedback. It's interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, we realized how important online giving was, just because we had some folks that honestly, their invitations to events went to their office businesses, and so you would have a lot of folks that would get paper mail at somewhere they wouldn't be returning to for many, many months. And then also I have a couple of clients that they just weren't able to check their mail at their office for checks, etc. So we're really encouraging online gifts as much as possible. And that online, Sondee, like you mentioned, I think that's one of my favorite trainings to do, is sitting with a board and teaching them how to tweet and how to share Facebook information and how to tag themselves. So I think that's an excellent idea. Okay, everyone on this seminar, I would have to say this is probably one of my favorite questions, and one that hopefully you will really take and learn from is, what are any new sources of funding or revenue you have not thought of approaching prior to the pandemic? Some new ideas that everyone has been forced to think outside of the box from the normal individuals, corporations, foundations, etc. So any new sources of funding that you came up with during this time? Lisa.
Again, I think it's interesting because for us, I think this has been less about completely new sources and more about thinking about just really questioning our existing model and finding new ways to work within that. So we've expanded into virtual programming in ways that we would never have considered before this. And every one of those projects has been different. We've done a radio play, a performance recorded on Zoom, a documentary. We recorded one show in the performer's home with a green screen. We did a concert series filmed on site. And for that first round of programming, June through September, essentially, we actually offered all of those performances free of charge to everyone, because we really looked at this as an opportunity to expand access and reach new audiences, and honestly, just provide a little joy and entertainment that people so desperately need during this time. And creating that access, which had no revenue attached, was in fact very inspiring for some of our existing donors and funders across all of our areas: individuals, foundations, corporations, government. I mean, we've seen increased support for that work because of the way that we have been sharing that with the community. And during that time, we did solicit donations in a really active way during the ticket registration process, with a suggested amount that could be adjusted by the patron. And we found that we had a lot of patrons and donors who were actually making multiple gifts. So they were essentially kind of taking that message for themselves and saying, here you go, I'm buying a ticket every time they registered for a performance or an event. So, again, it was just a shift in the way that we are communicating about what we're doing and asking people to engage. That was really positive. But then interestingly, we also heard from a lot of people, why aren't you charging me money? And we heard this continued feedback from audiences and stakeholders about the value that we're providing. And so we have also begun to look at options for monetizing that virtual programming, which is a whole different webinar, possibly for a different audience. Because it's a really interesting question. What is the right price point for a theatrical production that's being presented digitally? How does that work in the world of Netflix when we understand that subscription model is so low cost, and the way that people consume digital entertainment has a very different value proposition in our learned behaviors. So, we've been working through that, and actually as we move through the fall, our next 3 shows now through December, we are testing a fee-based model with those shows, and of course still with an option to add a donation. And this is, a quick note. I know that when I'm in webinars, I always love really specific suggestions. And we have been using an online platform called Bonfire, which many of you may already be aware of. We had just launched a new brand in conjunction with our new building and the move to the Gordy, and we have used that platform to offer a limited edition t-shirt and now to create a whole line of merch, which people are very excited about. And it's not a huge revenue source, but it is a ridiculously simple platform to use. It includes a donation option. So people really feel good and again, kind of start to think about themselves as donors. And that's been truly a way, as much as anything, to keep people engaged and to make them feel a little bit invested and connected and like they're supporting us in this way during this time.
Lisa, thank you. I love Bonfire. I love that. Note that, everybody. And honestly, just a reminder that we have at the end of this, all of our panelists' contact information. So if you want to speak more to Lisa about Bonfire, if you want to ask Sondee more about purpose in the park, right? Or picnic with a purpose, we can you can contact them later. But to continue for number 4, Sondee, what are some any new or like Lisa pointed out, refined or different funding or revenue sources that y'all had not done before prior to the pandemic?
Yes, yeah. So similar to Lisa, it's rethinking how we are approaching some of our existing donors. Although I will say we have been touched by the funders who approached us. I know some of the congregations that we partner with were the first to step up and ask how they could help. And while some of them had to reduce their giving this year, understandably, they've been so helpful in other ways, really mobilizing their congregants to help us with some of our in-kind needs and making sure that our clients are able to meet their basic needs. So food drives and making masks for our clients, those sorts of things that the individual members of the congregations have been extremely helpful with. And similarly with some of our corporate partners who have had to reduce their giving, they've really stepped up in helping with some of our technology needs and making sure that the students that we serve have the capability to do virtual schooling and are set up, and similarly with food drives and kind of for our clients. Okay, my phone is ringing and hopefully y'all can't all hear that. So, sorry.
Hopefully it's your mom saying you're doing a great job is what I'm planning it is. Thank you so much, Sondee. Okay, question number 5 is now we're going internally a little bit. And what are the best ways you have found to engage internal and external stakeholders? And especially if y'all have any comments on your board. That is something that I think is very important because that's your closest and deepest supporters is your board. And you need them more now than ever. So Karim, what are some best ways you have found to keep your stakeholders really invested at MD Anderson?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And, you know, again, like you've heard, many of my colleagues have shared right now, expansion of our events and engagement to virtual models and really just thinking about that in different ways has been very powerful. So for us, you know, we've long wanted to figure out how do you bring the board members or volunteers in to, you know, the behind the scenes tour of a lab at MD Anderson. And so, you know, some of these models have really helped us to do this. By and large, I saw a chat about the types of platforms, you know, we've done Zoom, WebEx, some of the basic ones, and the ones I've seen, predominantly Zoom offers a lot of flexibility to do some of these virtual education seminars. So we've done a lot of that. Also video calls with faculty and staff has been powerful. You know, and even personal touch, the tailored videos from faculty and leadership. So, you know, when we've got donors that have supported a faculty member or research for a while, you know, asking the faculty member to sit at home like each of us and with their iPhone kind of film it. So it's not high end types of videoing. And I think those have been really impressive and I think impactful. Because everybody knows that personal engagement and touch, people acknowledge that, I think, especially now. And then some of the pivots for our committees. Recently, a Brain Trust for Philanthropy was created, which is a group of volunteers and donors offering guidance and helping us to test the waters as we contemplate fundraising plans moving forward. And so, again, I think the central theme has been stewardship and engagement and really inviting people in, to the boardroom and to your living room, if you will, in a different way, to bring them along and let them know and look under the hood as to what's happening. And so those are a couple of things. The other one that I've been really impressed with is internal focus. So very strong focus on supporting and communicating with employees, a lot more flexibility to the workday, right? Regular communications at all levels from leadership, biweekly, all staff calls. Historically, we were lucky if we did, one of these a year. And now we're doing them biweekly for the all staff of the development division, not to mention your weekly check-ins and sometimes even daily check-ins with some of your folks. Team-based and working group, weekly huddles, I mentioned daily check-ins. Those have all been effective. And then even broader, the division and organization-wide town halls that are happening monthly for all 20,000 employees at MD Anderson. And so I've been really impressed with the institution's ability to really lean in from a leadership and communication perspective and offer opportunities for engagement. And if anything, I think Sondee mentioned this as well, is the just Zoom fatigue is work is beginning to really keep an eye on things like Zoom fatigue and burnout with activities and ideas such as no internal meeting Wednesday afternoons, which is kind of shocking. Of course, the meeting with donors still is an option. And then implementing 50-minute meetings, where you're ending 10 minutes early, some of the things that you've seen are the best practices out there, but seeing the organization and the office really lean into that has been, I think, very helpful. And then there are a lot of significant requests for folks to take their PTO and even allocation of folks for their wellness appointments to encourage that. And really caring for the person and the whole employee has been a big one. And we've seen board members respond to that as well with our caring fund, where that is been created and helped people during Harvey and other types of massive events. And board members have stepped up to take care of and to provide support for some of the workforce. And so I think it's a very human element that's brought all of us together. And the institution, I think, is doing a remarkable job navigating these times as best they can.
Karim, thank you. I actually think you brought up an excellent point, which is its own, honestly, webinar. Is we speak so much about our donors and how to continue fundraising, but there is definitely a conversation to be had in who is doing that fundraising and how to care for them as well. So Amy and I will take note of that. I saw a meme that a webinar for staff self-care was pretty much people would get on the webinar and then take a nap. You logged off. And so it was, which I think is, funny, but also brilliant that you tell your boss, I've got this webinar, and then the host will be like, do whatever you want for an hour and be done. But that's an excellent, excellent point. Now, Sondee, what are some best ways you have found to engage both internally and externally the stakeholders at Search?
Right. So as Karim was saying, I know with my team personally, we used to have a weekly meeting and then our one-on-ones, but we still have our hour-long weekly meeting, but we're doing daily check-ins with the whole team just to stay connected, and we miss seeing each other, and a lot of times it just turns into chit-chat about personal lives as opposed to work, but it's just keeping those bonds. And so yeah, but from the Search perspective, when most people think about agencies serving people who are homeless, you think about overnight shelters, you think about soup kitchens, and what Search does is a little harder to explain and to understand. And so previously, before the pandemic, we had been doing van tours where typically our board members would invite other people to join us to help people really understand what we mean when we talk about moving people from the streets into housing and into stability. And so we would hop in one of our vans with one of our outreach staff members, visit the encampments to get an understanding of what's happening there, move on to the Beacon, which is the day center, and then go to one of the housing sites where our clients are now living. And so obviously we cannot do those, and they were so impactful in really helping people understand the bigger picture and the complexities of homelessness. And so we also were doing periodic speaker series events here at our headquarters again, to help people get a more in-depth understanding of our work. And so we figured out a way to do those van tours virtually through the speaker series, where we would invite, our partners at the Beacon and at Timanaw CDC or New Hope Housing to be part of the virtual van tour and try to replicate it best we can. Obviously, it's not the same, but still helping people to get that deeper understanding. And then we've also been doing regular email communications with our stakeholders. I think, as everybody, when the pandemic hit, we were doing quick updates to let people know how Search was handling the pandemic, how we were operating, and what was happening. And we got such positive feedback from people that we've continued those. So every week our CEO is sending out a short but very impactful update on what's happening. I kid with her that she must feel like a rabbi or a minister who every week has to come up with something profound to say. But it's enabled us to feel connected and for our constituents, our stakeholders and supporters to feel like they're still engaged, they understand what's going on, they're a part of it, and help them really appreciate their impact. So, previously we had been doing a newsletter every other month, but I think we will stick with this. Want to overstay our welcome, so to speak, but really have gotten such positive feedback on those communications, so people are up to date on what's happening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sondee. We are actually going to go ahead and skip question 6 that I just realized I didn't have to say because only the 5 of us knew there was a question number 6. So question number 7 will go to all our panelists so that we'll be able to answer some of the great questions in the chat. So the biggest question Amy and I get is, so what do I do about next year's budget? How do we plan for next year's revenue and expenses? So Lise, I'm going to start with you. And how is Stages and your team planning for next year and the fundraising that it will entail?
This is such a great question for us, especially in the performing arts. And we have been doing so much scenario planning throughout all of this, as I'm sure everyone has along with us. We had actually just launched a new strategic plan in September of 2019, so really not that long before all this started. And we really do use that plan as the vision and guide for activity across the organization. And in the early days of the pandemic, as we were trying to wrap our heads around all of this, there was this moment of uncertainty and anxiety where we thought, how can we continue with this plan when everything about the way that we operate and what we do has had to stop and change? And we had a series of conversations with our board and staff where we ultimately realized that even though our entire landscape has shifted, and that remains true today, in fact, that plan still does exactly what it's intended to do. It articulates our mission, our vision, our core values and goals, and it serves as a guidepost to help us understand where we need to go. And a few of the tactics in that plan have changed, but honestly, fewer than you might expect. And so we kind of had to release that fear and affirm that we know who we are and what we need to do, and then find ways to continue doing it. And that has an impact in the way that we are doing our nuts and bolts planning in terms of budgeting and planning for next year and beyond, because we recognize that at the end of the day, we are still following this roadmap, and we are identifying the ways that we can continue to achieve those goals. So we're still doing a lot of scenario planning. We recognize that for our sector in particular, there's still a high degree of uncertainty about when we will be able to return to traditional in-person programming. That question is very unclear. And that makes overall long-range planning really difficult. So institutionally, we're continually assessing where we are and what's happening in our particular community and making adjustments to our programming truly every few months. But from a fundraising perspective, we have embraced the opportunity to focus on longer term commitments from our closest supporters, multi-year pledges, planned giving, which I know Karim talked about, endowment. since in fact, what we're experiencing right now is the ultimate case for that support for those who are most passionate about what we do. So we really are working with folks who are closest to us and asking them to help ensure that Stages will continue to grow and thrive, no matter what else 2020 or 2021 or 2022 throws at us.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Karim, how is your team at MD Anderson planning for next year?
Yeah, I think similar to Lisa shared, we're contemplating a strategic plan. We're amidst a strategic plan and potential campaign thoughts as well. And so there's been a lot of conversations that the organization has had. And I think ultimately some parallels with Lisa, boldly and with the growth mindset, a lot of leaning in, with a great degree of flexibility and adaptability. So you've got plan A, plan B, and plan C. And I think that one of the keys has been that I've witnessed is really to continue to plan for the year, engage and take action wherever we can to keep moving forward. Don't be scared off, to offer the people the opportunity to engage and to make a difference, make the ask, because a lot of the folks that, especially the ones that have been here with you through your journey, they're completely committed to the mission. And we know, from a cancer perspective, cancer doesn't stop. And so we found a lot of folks have said, yeah, absolutely, almost a double down on the importance of it because it's aligned with them. And so I think that, with a lot of from a major plan principal gift perspective, stewardship, existing relationship seems a little easier in many ways. And yet at the same time, the reality is versus establishing some of these new types of relationships. So as every panelist has talked about, capturing the new relationships is important. And then, from a gift officer perspective, it's that discovery call. That's different. And I think really spending some time thinking about how you approach these folks is important, and yet also not forgetting the fundamentals. A lot of our fundamentals still work. Call the folks, reach out to them, offer an opportunity to engage, give them an update, and above all, check in with them to see how they're doing. To really kind of establish a relationship. So I think all of us are really trying to lean in. We're also taking the time as best we can right now to kind of make sure our systems and processes and technology are where they need to be. And so that when this thing moves on, or we just are ready to rock and roll, then, internally we're ready to go as well. So those are a few of the things we're doing this year.
Fantastic. Karim, I think you made a very good point in that you said cancer never stops. I'll be honest, and just like homelessness doesn't stop for Search and Sondee. And with Lisa, I can speak on personal experience, and I will speak on behalf of Amy. The love of theater doesn't stop ever either. So I think across the board, there is a need to continue the programming for everybody. So Sondee, I'll have you have the last word on how are y'all planning next year at Search?
Sure. So for this year, for the current fiscal year, we did adjust our fundraising goal down when we were going through the budgeting process. So far we are on track, but we just wanted to give ourselves a little cushion with so much uncertainty. Clearly, obviously, the pandemic has impacted so broadly across all of our sectors, and so giving ourselves that cushion, but moving forward, we're really looking on a more long-term basis and trying to plan out for the next 3 to 5 years rather than just taking it 1 year at a time, because while hopefully things will be getting back to normal in the relatively near future, the after effects will probably be with us for quite some time. And so, Karim had talked about planned giving. That's something that we've been talking about doing for quite a while. And it's one of those projects that would get pushed to the back burner, and now it is front and center. So we're moving forward to really focus on that planned giving, especially now Search has been around for 30 years, and we feel like we're at the point where people are comfortable and confident that we're not going anywhere. And then a heavy focus on retaining our donors, the ones who are giving and the ones who are having to cut back, just staying in touch, making sure that they still feel a part of what we're doing, they understand what's happening, and they feel appreciated and know how important their support is and what an impact they are making. So heavy focus on that donor retention. So, and then, you know, as an agency, we are already expanding one of our programs. We have historically focused heavily on chronic homelessness, individuals who've been homeless for a long, long time, but are expanding our rapid rehousing program, which is really for individuals and families who are sometimes finding themselves homeless for the first time, but are able to get back on their feet more quickly with some short-term assistance. So ramping up that program, but just as an agency, really continuing to adapt to this, to operating in this new environment so that we can continue to move people into homes of their own.
Wonderful. Sondee, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Amy, who will be asking some questions of our panelists that were in the chat. And so stay tuned. Amy?
Hi, this was just so great. Thank y'all. We have about 3 minutes for chat questions. And so they actually are focused on technology. Thank you, Michelle. She would like to hear more from each panelist on the virtual engagement with their teams, donors, and community partners. And what tools are you using? What's working well and what's not? So since you did cover a lot of that virtual engagement, if you have just a quick, we'll do a lightning round with our last 3 minutes. Any other thoughts on virtual engagement for community donors and then tools? Thanks.
So I'll share another one. I know we're all using Zoom. We've actually had good luck with a platform called StreamYard, which allows you to basically to do a virtual event to either Facebook Live or YouTube. So those are platforms that people are really familiar with and can easily engage on.
Karim?
Sorry, yeah, not so much the platforms, but I think just making the time to do it. So again, as simple as saying you've got a faculty member recording a thank you for a donor on their phone and then, you know, forwarding that along has been very useful, good time. And then I think just setting the context to make those check-ins, be it, you know, traditional phone call or offering Zoom where it works for folks, I think is just the key is keep on doing it, whichever the platform is. At least in our work, I think is just continue to do.
Sondee?
Yes, and so internally we rely heavily on Teams, but for our events we have been using Zoom in combination with Facebook Live to broadcast. And you know, I've watched several of these virtual events from different organizations, and so many of them are professionally produced and incredible. You know, I would like to think that while ours are not, you know, professionally produced, hopefully they look just as professional, but there are so many different resources out there now to do those professional productions. That's in the budget.
Thank you, Sondee. And that goes into our last question, which is the types of event production companies, the video production companies. I'll throw out their Mouthwatering Media is excellent. I'm working with them. We're a small client. So any other video virtual event production companies that we could offer the audience?
I could offer just a couple, and I don't know, you know, it's going to depend on budget. We have worked with Vision a few times and had really great experiences with them, and also with Staging Solutions.
Great, excellent. Thank y'all. Oh, go ahead, Karim.
No, I was going to say I'm happy to follow up on some of those questions as well, and talk to some folks that do that part of it kind of every day.
Great, and yeah, the company that I talked about was Mouthwatering Media. Douglas actually does all of our NPD videos. He's excellent and is also translated into the video space. That is one nugget I would say is don't underestimate the power of video in the digital space. Get videos out there as much as you can. There's also a great resource called ThankView. That is excellent. And then also, I would also not underestimate text to give. Mobile Cause is also a good resource for text to give. So here is thank you so much, everyone. Here's everyone's email if you would like to connect with the panelists. Thank you all so much. This was a wonderful, wonderful event. You also have my and Loubel's contact information too, if you need further further information, but we really appreciate everyone being here today. And we hope to see you at our NPD virtual event coming up in November. So thanks again and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.